Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment that I will provide to the pages. Madam Chair, now that the Chamber has decided that the Veterinary Profession Act should come under the purview of this, I'm going to try to become somewhat more surgical in my approach. As opposed to trying to cut the cancer out entirely, I'll now try to remove as much of this cancer as it can be removed and at least apply some judicious chemotherapy to what's left. And what we're going to do here is we're going to discuss a little bit about the process of self-regulation and self-governance. Now, earlier during debate, I read out a couple of quotes from Mr. James Casey, who is a world authority on self-regulating professional bodies in Canada and worldwide. He has literally written the book on self-regulation. And Mr. Casey has provided his opinion that this bill is a massive overreach that is unprecedented in our province. A massive overreach into the affairs of a self-regulating profession, which, as I've stated in the House before, has been doing this for 111 years. Our province was less than 1 year old when the first Veterinary Professions Act was passed, and that Veterinary Professions Act provided for self-regulation of the veterinary profession. And what was interesting, though, is that that earliest Veterinary Professions Act and all of its all of the ones that came after, let's say, all had a clause that indicated that the Lieutenant Governor in Council, in other words, Cabinet, had the final approving authority on any changes on the Act. Now, that's really important because the Veterinary Association cannot change its regulations, its bylaws, or anything in the Veterinary Profession Act without Cabinet approval. So Cabinet has always had the final say on things involving the veterinary profession. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's actually good. But what is interesting is that is a greater degree of control than a number of other professions in Alberta have. A lot of the other self-regulating professions don't have that check and balance. If they make a change to their regulation or their bylaws, it's just changed. They don't have to get Cabinet approval, but we do. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a body that is duly elected, of elected officials taking a look at it. But where I have a problem, and where I have a problem in Bill 31, is what Bill 31 does in terms of self-regulating professions, and specifically, obviously, the veterinary profession. And I refer to, on page 25 of the bill, under regulations under section 48.3 sub 1, and I'll read it slowly. The Lieutenant Governor in Council, after consultation with the Council, may make regulations respecting fees and authorization for veterinary medicine, including, without limitation, regulations, and then it goes on A through H to the scope of what those regulations could entail. Now, what exactly does all that mean? Well, the Lieutenant Governor in Council is Cabinet. The 21 individuals who have been appointed to Executive Council is Cabinet. And when this bill passes, it will be Cabinet that will have the power to make regulations for the veterinary profession. Cabinet will have that power. And what will that power include? Well, that power will include regulations respecting fees and authorization for veterinary medicine. Cabinet will have the power to decide the fees of the Veterinary Association. That is unbelievable level of power and interference with a private business. So if Cabinet decides that the current fee for an off-examination of a dog, which is $89.50 in the fee guide, but in polling 6 veterinary clinics from across Alberta, the range was $76.50 to $85. Not a single one charges as much as the fee guide. That fee, a member of Cabinet, for example, my friend, the Honourable Government House Leader, says that's unreasonable. Veterinarians aren't that smart. $89, that's just gouging the public. That should be worth 22 bucks. And he could say that. He would have the power to say that.
Point of order.
Order has been called.
Perhaps the honourable member would like to clarify that he's speaking hypothetically and not attempt to put words in my mouth.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
I'm happy to do that for my friend, the Government House Leader. I would never suppose to put words in his mouth. I think that'd be impossible, and it would also be kind of pointless because he has lots of words in his own mouth that there'd be hardly any room. So, Madam Chair, what I am saying is that Cabinet would have the power to make the decision as to what fees should be charged if this were to pass. And fees could be set at a level that are unreasonably low and would render veterinary practices non-profitable, or they could be set at a level that is unreasonably high and mean that there can be no access to veterinary services by the general public. The people that I think understand best what sort of fees are appropriate are the people who own the businesses that provide the service. And I guess my question is, what's next? If you're going to regulate the fees of veterinarians, what's next on the agenda? And so my amendment, Madam Chair, is really actually a fairly simple one, and I won't read through all of it because it's not really necessary to read through all of it. And that is that, and I move that Bill 31, A Better Deal for Consumers and Businesses Act, be amended in Section 2, Sub 2, by striking out the proposed Section 48.3 and substituting the following regulations. And here's the key difference. The Council may make regulations, and then it goes A through H, which is the same as it's in the current bill, same wording. And then the final is Sub 2 is a regulation under Subsection 1 does not come into effect, or force rather, until it has been, unless it has been approved by the Lieutenant Governor in Council. So the exact wording that is in the bill remains. All of the powers that were to be given to Cabinet remain, and Cabinet will still have the final say on all of those regulations. But the concern that we have as a profession, and it is a concern that has been heightened since the totally inadequate consultation that went on with regard to this bill, is that the current bill says the Lieutenant Governor in Council, after consultation with the Council, now that Council is the Council of the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association, after consultation, has all these powers. And we're also quite concerned with the insertion of the phrase, including without limitation. If that's in the bill, this Cabinet has power to write in any regulation it wants. And that, to me, is a level of control being handed over to an all-being well-meaning group of people that I'm sure want to do what's best for Alberta, but a group of people that I'm not sure always necessarily understand the nuances of running a veterinary practice and why a practice has to be profitable, why a practice has to replace its equipment, and medical equipment is very expensive, veterinary equipment specifically so, and why we have to do things like pay our staff at a level that is commensurate with their experience and allows them to have a good living. And so, Madam Chair, this is the concern that we as veterinarians have. We do not want to see our association be the first, possibly in a line of professional organizations, to lose its power to self-regulate. But that's what this bill does. Make no mistake, this bill writes in that we lose the power of self-regulation. And that's something that veterinarians really don't want to lose. We feel that we have discharged the responsibility, the privilege of self-regulation, that we've discharged that responsibility and privilege in very good faith. And that, in my opinion at least, if we are trusted professionals, that we haven't done anything to deserve having that privilege taken away from us. And so, I'm moving this amendment to suggest that the normal course of events for making of regulations, where the ABVMA Council, in consultation with the membership as a whole, comes up with a regulation, has those changes to the regulations ratified at an AGM of the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association, and then those regulations are approved by cabinet, which is what has always been in place. And if we come up with something that cabinet doesn't like, well, they have the power to turn it down and say, go back to the drawing board. They still have the final say. We're not taking that out of here. But I have a problem when the course of events and how things are done and have been done for 111 years are suddenly reversed by this government, by this minister, without demonstrating that it will be better for the general public of Alberta, for the animals of Alberta, or for veterinarians. That has not been shown to me that putting it in the hands of cabinet will result in an improvement. So unless it can be proven to me that cabinet is a better safekeeper of the veterinary profession than the elected council of the veterinary profession, I can't support the bill that includes giving these wide-ranging, vague, and sweeping powers to cabinet. I can't, approve that because, quite frankly, it's putting the control of the regulation of the profession in the hands of people that, although again, they may be well-meaning, I just simply don't know that they have the information that is required in order to make the decisions to self-regulate our profession. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The amendment is referred to as A6. Are there any other members wishing to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. On Amendment A6 as proposed by the Honourable Member for Vermilion Lloydminster, are you agreed? Agreed. Opposed? No. The amendment is defeated. Are there any other members wishing to speak? The Honourable Member for Bonnyville Cold Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair.